Greetings, my fellow human beings. Indeed, this is a time of great concern, anxiety, and fear. And I want to dedicate this time, dear friends, and friends means having a common interest, and you and I meeting today reveals a common interest. I appreciate very much your presence from your home, and I welcome you into my home so that we can lift the spirit and look at the future in a different way than the curves, the death, and the disease. I am giving some space time for people to arrive. And in this time, I will use it to answer some questions that I have received after doing videos over the last couple of weeks. And one of a common question has been, "Sir, what is your background?" So I would like to tell you something about me before we enter into real material. I was born 72 years and 11 months ago. And from very young, I had experiences that you would say escaped the ordinary. And this was crowned by the passing of my grandfather, who appeared to me during the first few days of his leaving this world and told me not to worry, that he was fine and that life went on. With that in mind, at age 9, I chose to help people. And to help people in that which is the most fundamental thing of you and me. We want to be happy. So, not finding any university that taught about happiness, I entered medical school and I became a physician in my country of birth, Chile, and later specialized through some residencies in pediatrics, psychiatry, and family practice. Harvard, Colorado, and Chile. I realized, though, that there was an ancient Greek statement that says, "Physician, heal thyself." And the fundamental question, which I want to bring up now for you and for me, is the question, who am I? Beyond the color of my skin, the programming of my early childhood education, my so-called race, religion, culture. A question that has guided me throughout my life has been the question about the essential identity of you, the essential identity of who we are. So after specializing in Western medicine and not having a clear answer to that question, I began to meditate and lived in India, in Northern Africa, and in the jungle of South America, exposing myself to a teaching which was an ancient learning process that had to do with what is called awakening. Awakening to what? Awakening to one's consciousness that goes beyond the physical, mental, emotional, social, environmental, that goes beyond our skin-encapsulated ego and goes and comprehends that regardless of who we appear to be, we are connected. And we call that connection a spiritual connection. We call spirituality that field in which we come to the conclusion of finding out that you and I are deeply related. That at what is called by some a soul level, we are united. And what is called an essential self resides throughout time and space in you, in her, in him, in us, in me. And that is why I welcomed you as fellow humans, because our species, differently than many others, has either forgotten or not yet realized that we are at one in this together, which leads me to the current worldly situation. Throughout many, many years, I specialized in assisting and helping people to cross the barriers of the false identifications, many times based on trauma, on negative experiences, and sometimes based on pride and positive experiences. And these sub-personalities with which we run around sometimes have functions. Sometimes you're a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, a businessman, a musician, an artist, etc. But many times constitutes barriers that create fear of the other. And this other is me. This other is you. And yet, because we have not pierced the veils of unconsciousness, we see others as strange, different, and threatening. In 2020, we have really found something which we call the other. And this is the coronavirus 19, threatening you and threatening me. And I want to clearly acknowledge that there is no easy out, that the anxiety that exists, the uncertainty that is presented, and the fear of death, the ultimate fear that each one of us has to confront sometime, is prevalent. Unfortunately, politicized, but I will not now go into that. People are dying. I was reflecting the other day on these numbers that appear on our television screen: 1,000, 10,000, 40,000, 47,000 today in the United States alone. And since I see people from many other countries and I give them the welcome, more in other countries. And I was reflecting, as I said the other day, and ask you now, have you ever been physically present with someone that is dying? And I was remembering Carmen, a patient of mine back in 1967, which because of an error in the emergency room ended up in the ward where I was a medical student with a severe destruction of her liver, a severe hepatitis. And those days were the days in which there was no easy solution. There was no hepatic transplant. I fought to keep her alive day and night. But unfortunately, the toxicity that she was living was such that she passed in my arms. And that was my first encounter with the silence of death. I'm not talking about being with your loved ones and they pass, your grandmother, your grandfather. I am talking with someone that is just another person. Not emotionally related, historically related to oneself, but alive in one moment and gone the next. And in this shift lies a whole wake-up call about not looking at the numbers of these pandemics as so many dead, but saying it differently. 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 person not participating in the most ecstatic experience that a human being can have, which is called living. Living and loving. Gone. So I thought, if we would really realize that we are now still alive, and that this gift of life, this joy of life, is given freely, gratis, moment by moment, by a source that we aspire to touch, to communicate, to connect, but which ultimately allows us to be able to smile, to embrace, to speak, to assist, to help, to comfort, compassionately and lovingly. And that this, even this, is being threatened by the distancing, by the social distancing, in which you and I cannot sit in my seminar room and embrace each other. Thanks heavens for social media, because we can connect in some other way than physically, which is existentially. And bring in the light, if you will, the light from the sun, which is the closest one. And right now, fill your body with that light as an exercise, as many like to call it. And send it through the screen that you're watching to all the others which are watching, who are watching right now. We establish a spiritual community, because we establish it from the place of who we are and not the place of what we do. We connect. We connect essence to essence, soul to soul in this moment right now, and lift each other up from the negative emotions of fear, of doubt, of uncertainty, of anger, of loss. And we bring ourselves to a conversation that is a conversation about the nature of reality and the nature of the sacredness of who you and I are. Therefore, we shift the vocabulary. And instead of focusing on the bad news that bombard us day and night, which are there, and which compassionately we must help out not to succumb to the negativity, but on the contrary, to elevate ourselves individually and planetarily to the notion that we are one humanity and that we need not, after this crisis that we're living, come back to normal. Because what we call normal has led us to war, to non-preparation for pandemias, to destruction, hunger, and poverty. No, not back to normal. Forward to a future in which the limits, the boundaries, the frontiers, the notion of separateness imbued in sexual orientation or in race, mental concepts who are not our identity, in ideologies that are not our identity, in activities which are not our identity, but as a lack of having looked for our true self, for our true essence, for our true identity, for our true being, calm us down and we say, yes, I am a South American, a North American, an African, an Asian, and so on. The virus does not respect that. Neither should we anymore respect the limits that we've placed on ourselves and the billions and billions of currencies of all kinds spent to defend ourselves from our neighbor under the pretense and the fantasy that they will attack us, instead of shifting to a civilization which is a global civilization, a civilization that holds hands when a pandemic and doesn't point fingers when an epidemic shows up, a civilization that is based, yes, on love, because love is the recognition of our similar consciousnesses. Because love is the vehicle that advances us on our path in the grand story of our soul and in the little story of our transient passing through this earth. $1 trillion a year in weaponry, much more if we add the other countries. Resources that instead of being allocated to health and healing, wellness and comprehension of our true nature, awakening, enlightenment, loving, compassion, are allocated to defense, separation, fear, anger, and the survival of a form of living, which in the last 100 and something years we call nation states, which is obsolete because we are a species living on Earth. And what you destroy affects me, and what I destroy affects you. So the crisis in which we live in might give us a possibility of realization that we truly are in this at one, humanity together, and that this way in which we have been living needs to change to a new order of relationship, a new order of perception, a new leadership that is ethical in the sense of pro-true life, not partidary of one way or another. How long do we live here? At best, 100 years or so. How much joy are we taught to give, to extract, and to produce during this time? And how much competitiveness, separateness, animosity is being instructed in our schools, so that we think that we are different, so that we think that we are invulnerable, and so that we can do on earth whatever we imagine we can do not respecting the quality of the air, the quality of the water, the quality of the earth itself. Coronavirus goes into a human being through the use of this protein, which is like a key to our door, with 300 amino acids in a specific form that can unlock the door and enter into our system. Think for one moment, what do we do when we see a forest close to an ocean and a developer says we can destroy this forest and build a nice resort and then put some trees around so that they can imagine that they are in a forest and sell it, not asking the earth, the trees, and our fellow animals and forms of life that are sentient and conscious for permission, because we think we own it all. But now the virus is showing us that we're ill-prepared to defend our life from its attack. Or is its presence a reminder for us to transform ourselves and transform the ability in which we experience life so that we prepare ourselves and the younger generation to live in awe of this miracle of life, to live in gratitude for the place that we are. Not only do we need to change the health system and coordinate a global health system, which is not WHO, but has to be newly created, so that when there is a problem in one place, the rest of the brother, sisterhood of man and woman can implement assistance and help. And this requires selflessness. And to me, it requires the discovery of who am I. Ask yourself the question, not who is Carlos Warter, but who am I in first person singular? Who are you? Who am I? And you will see that so much life force has been given away to identities and identifications with what we do, or what we have, or what we think we are, social status, assets, jobs disappearing at a high rate right now. And dive deeper so that you can discover the answer of who you are, who am I, in a way in which we can see that you and I are represented in all other human beings every single moment. And that's when a change gets produced in our thinking, because we begin to enjoy the well-being of others. We begin to care for others. We begin to love humanity. And that the joy that others can experience are my joy, and the joy that others can not experience are my lack. So we begin to cooperate, not just as a defense of a pandemic, not just as a defense of a hurricane, of a tornado, of a tsunami, of an earthquake, of a fire, but as the change in the educational model so that people learn true history. I call it historiography because it is always written by the convenience of the winners and never taught in equanimity with the existence of life all over the planet. We live 100 years at best, maybe 105. And 100 years later, nobody remembers you and me. Everybody knows that they had a great-great-great-grandfather, but nobody knows what that person was about. Neither do we look back in history and remember that our ancestors lived and went through their problems, implanted in their education by absolutist kings, emperors which stole the land and controlled everybody, and governments that, as long as they can stay in power, will not care about the well-being of babies, and much less of old people. They will only care about the human machine. How can a human being produce more, has been the teaching of this last 100 years or more after the Industrial Revolution. Cheer up. We don't need to continue that way. I recall having written during the Contra Sandinista battlefield in 1985 a paper called Peace for a New Era. And this document was added to the Contadora Treaty that brought a little tranquility, I wouldn't call it peace, a little serenity to the battlefield of Central America. I had the good chance of meeting many heads of states and meeting them personally and saying, what will happen when this nation state will disappear? And I recall in the Academy of Science in the Soviet Union in 1988 being told it will never disappear. Where is it now? Kingdoms disappear. Empires disappear. Human beings disappear. But human life is eternal. So why not focus on the eternal now that we are right here today and bring in as much positivity, as much light, as much love as we can into this container, so that the field that we create, number one, is immune to the presence of other fields which are endangering, to say the least, danger. We know from quantum physics that every particle has an associated wave. Every wave has a particle. And this RNA piece called COVID-19 is also a field, is also a vibratory frequency that some people, unfortunately, are overwhelmed by, and others develop antibodies because it's the recognition of that which is not oneself, and heal. I want to suggest, with the uncertainty in which I also live, but don't despair, that we can elevate our vibratory field, our vibratory frequency, to a place of peace, a place of not being constantly negatively affected by the circumstance, whatever the circumstance is. And this is what I have been doing and teaching for almost 50 years. Working with individuals, very simple, to de-identify from that which you are not, and begin to familiarize oneself with the energy field that one is. And the result is more happiness, more peace, more joy, and more productivity. Because there's the inner aspect of spirituality in which we go within our own consciousness, we close our eyes and ears, and we navigate into our heart of hearts to find the silence of the I am, that you are, the I am that she is, the I am that I am that I am, the life force itself. But then with that tranquility, with that serenity, with that positivity, we engage in activities that use our talents to make this a better world. Because spirituality is not a one-way street. It is a give and take, a receiving and a giving, a breathing in and a breathing out, a systole and a diastole, a balance of yin and yang. And beyond this duality, the persistence of us being custodians of this planet instead of predators. I see we live in a three-headed crisis right now. Let me complicate it a little bit more. We have the coronavirus, and we fear that it can have another surge in the fall, and none of our wonderful scientists, may they be blessed for the work they do, and may they be supported for the methodology of science that they use, has been able to tell us exactly what the future brings. And yet we are living another crisis that we have sort of forgotten. And this is the crisis of our climate. When we see the poles, the ice melting, the fresh water entering into the salt water, forms of life in this magnificent biodiversity of life on planet Earth disappearing by the masses. Because we have decided that instead of being custodians, we are exploiters, and we use and misuse the resources, as we call them, but really they are the sources of life. We exploit it all. And we look, including in scriptures, and it said there, I have given you all, human being. Take care of it. That second part is not remembered too often. I come from a generation in which the third crisis I am going to mention now was very familiar in the 80s. And it is the nuclear crisis. I am actually more concerned that in the hands of some culturally conditioned idiots, a nuclear explosion could be threatened. And the amount of nuclear weapons has not only proliferated in the last 25 years, but also we live in a time in which the treaties that would assure mutually assured death would become mad deterrence. And today we have no treaties. And everybody that is scientifically minded in the field of nuclear physics feels that they can synthesize a new nuclear weapon to defend the false identity that I was speaking before. And that has to change too. Will we wake up, or will this be just another September 11 in which we took the war far away from us in the United States? And instead of elevating the standard of living of human beings, trillions of dollars were wasted in wars. Wars of massive destruction, which did not benefit anybody except some pockets. And today, the rich and the poor, the young and the old, men and women, gay, lesbian, trans, with all the money that they have in the world, can't go to a restaurant, can't go to a movie theater, can't take an airplane or a cruise ship, because we have been checkmated by the lack of preparation and the invincibility apparent of this little portion of ribonucleic acid, which needs our DNA to grow and multiply. So the bug is not a bad guy. It just wants to reproduce. And it has found us as hosts. The developer is not a bad guy. He just wants to reproduce his assets. And there goes the forest I was mentioning before. We have to change from this outstanding greed that is educated in children, that believe that once they can pay one bill by their own, they are already adults. We have to change that. Because to become an adult of this species, it takes more than a few euros, a few pesos, a few euros. It takes maturing. It takes truly evolving. It takes growing up. And if we evolve and shift our identity from the identity of separateness to the identity of togetherness, which, as I said before, has been the work of all my seminars, all my books, all my talks, all my lectures, in medicine and out of medicine. The remembrance of who you are and the knowledge that we are the same. Nobody is higher and lower. Nobody is more important and less important. Nobody can contact the other today as we used to, and we miss the embrace. We missed the solidarity of being able to look into somebody's eyes and say, I love you, and receive that energy in return. We're isolated by order, but I believe in a higher order. And this higher order isolates us so that we can change, so that we can reflect, that we can say enough is enough to ourselves and to an educational system, a health system, an economic system, which is obsolete. No, I won't tell you what I think should be the next stage, because it is our job. It is we that need to be engaged for that. But we, after we go through the process of awakening, not one person, one vote, but one person, one dedication to evolve in such a way that the vote will consider the highest good of all. Not the pollution that creates illusions in the mind of being better. Take out a flag and go kill. We've had enough crusades. We've had enough inquisitions. We've had enough killing. In organized fashion, it's called war. In disorganized fashion, it's called murder. We've had enough of weapons on planet Earth. Yes, we are geniuses. We have developed drones. But instead of using the drones to transfer information into our brains, we use the drones to bomb, to destroy, to kill. In my youth, I happened to have the friendship of a few heads of states around the world. And I would speak with them after they would end their period of governance. And they would say, I so much agree with what you're saying, because I've been saying this since I can't remember. Always. And implemented with methodology that I call technology of the sacred, which I've recollected, invented, put together, imagined to help people wake up and begin to appreciate their own life first and the life of others. And these politicians that I was mentioning a moment ago would tell me, I wish I could have done it. But there are so many interests that turn the key in the opposite direction of fruitful living, that are so blind and so identified with the mediocrity of winning, of destroying the competition, instead of aligning with the competition a better way of living. A living that we can know ourselves and heal ourselves. A living in which we can change positioning, residence, not identity, positioning, from our over-exploited head to our underdeveloped heart. Let's shift the gravity from head to heart. And we will begin to see, maybe with guilt and shame, that for the first time is not a psychological incident related to private traumatic events in our upbringing, but begin to see what we are condoning, what we are allowing, what we are permitting while we are alive. Because from another perspective, those that think that reincarnation is possible, or life after life, or life in other dimensions of existence, which obviously must be so, since we can't be that selfish and think that the only form is ours. If we would look at what we do to each other, we would be ashamed. And we would change. So maybe this crisis is a forced retreat. Not a retreat like I want to invite you 3 months from now, if possible, to have here at our residence, in which all these words will not just be a menu for a great dinner, but they will be implemented. And so many bear witness that this has been so for them in their lives when they've worked with me. And yet we are in an obligatory retreat during this time. What do we do with our time? Yes, we can see Netflix, and that has a limit because the eyes get tired. And we can read and similarly come to a point to be up to date with what we should have read before. And we can walk, but so many people are alone. So many people are in an apartment that when they look out through their windows, they see another apartment and they see another lonely soul at the other side. And in some countries, they began to play instruments and sing to have some kind of connection, so that that which we took for granted 4 months ago is now a delicatessen. Moving into the new normal, not the old normal. A normal that allows for enlightenment, allows for spirituality not to be religiosity, allows for spirituality to be the exploration of our dimensions of being, allows for spirituality also to reach a goal in one's development so that we can come out and express it to others, so that others can benefit from our inner discovery. It is not about sitting and watching your neighbor. It is about integration, and integrating all the evolutionary steps that humanity has gone through, from the pre-Paleolithic through the Neolithic to antiquity, through modern times, through the space age, and move out of these divisions into a unified field, as physicists call it, in which the certainty of I am prevails over I am this or I am that. I will leave some time for questions because I will assume that you might have them. And I see many questions that thank me for what I'm saying and so on. And I want to have some questions that really give me a topic to be able to address it. Since I've answered the questions about my background and the background of my work, the drama of the crisis that we live in, and an eventual parallel opportunity of awakening, and the necessity to begin to become a think tank about what is the next way of governance for the federation of countries that live on Earth. Because the same as people in different states have gone through the pangs and the pains to become a union, and we always hear and like to hear that the state of the union is strong, we need to go through the union in our own field and say the state of the unified field that I am is strong, and I'm here to serve you. And I want your state to be strong so that we can really begin to cooperate to make heaven on earth, which has been the offer of so many philosophies, religions, organizations, and fulfilled. If any of them would have worked, we would already be in paradise. We would be living in cooperation with the earth and with each other. So I invite you to consider this retreat an opportunity to ask yourself the fundamental questions of the perennial philosophy. Who am I? Where do I come from? And where do I go? And thus creating a context that is larger than the dash between the date of the year that one is born and the date of the year that one is buried. There is a deeper search. There is a deeper thirst. There is a deeper hunger that we can satisfy. I bear witness that it is possible. It is possible to live in an extended consciousness, and that does not mean that some angst and some Furcht will not come to our life, but instead of being possessed by it, we can have it and hold it and see how to solve it for the good of all. Hello to so many people who are letting me into their house today in other countries and other continents. I truly appreciate the time that you have given me. I see it as a connection opportunity that will lead us to think and modify some given false identifications in order to open our mind, our heart, our soul, and love, and love, and love. Thank you very, very much. May you be blessed. May we meet again like this and in person in July, 3 months from now, 90 days from now, which I hope. I don't falsely hope, I hope sincerely. Our life will be less threatened, and that we will have learned from this obligatory separation the value of being together. May you be blessed. May this planet be blessed. May this solar system be blessed. And the holons in which we exist in higher dimensions of consciousness be aligned in such a way that we reach the destination of peace, and that our life here serves to self and others in a splendorous way. Thank you. One more thing that I would like to remind you is that this video will be sent to you and available, and that a page in Facebook will be opened, Friends of Carlos Warter, I think it was called before, that my assistants will contact you with an email thanking you for your presence here. And I want to thank especially Luciano Giavedoni and his team for coming up with the idea of making myself available, and for the support that he has given us. Thank you.